At 6:31 p.m., the chandeliers above the Palmer House ballroom shimmered like a sky of captive stars, and Chicago, polished, perfumed, pretending, held its breath without knowing why. The charity gala hummed with tuxedos and borrowed jewels, with officials who practiced their smiles in elevators and wives who studied their husbands' tells. A string quartet sawed sweetness through the air. Glasses kissed, cameras blinked, money changed hands dressed as mercy. And then a girl with a tray said 4 quiet words that froze the entire room. Sarah Johnson didn't know she was walking toward the most dangerous family in the city. She didn't know the man seated near the stage, silver hair swept back, black suit cut with old-world severity, was Salvatore Rossi, the Sicilian patriarch whose approval could build a skyline and whose disfavor could erase a person like chalk in rain. She was thinking about table numbers and the blister in her new shoes, the way the starched collar rasped her neck, and how tips turned into rent like magic if your hands didn't shake. She pivoted, balanced 5 flutes of champagne, and when an older man waved for her attention, his hand steady but the fingers slightly tremored, Sarah's mouth acted before her fear could. Sarah Bonu, Donsal. Even the quartet forgot its next note. The words were soft, not a performance, not what the TV shows tried to copy. Her vowels carried that gentle salt of the island, the consonants warmed by kitchen steam and church steps. It wasn't textbook Italian, it was Sicilian, intimate as a family table. The greeting hung there, the kind that belonged to doorways where daughters kissed foreheads and men put down burdens because a home had absorbed them. Sal Rossi's eyelids lifted. For the first time that evening, the old iron in him eased. Across from him, Giovanni Rossi, 32, precise tie, watch face like a moon of brushed steel, looked up from a conversation he wasn't enjoying and saw the reason the room went quiet. The waitress was slim, blonde, not flashy, eyes that analyzed without meaning to. She wore her hair in a careful twist that said professional, but a strand had escaped and curved at her temple like an accent mark. He saw details the way other men saw horizons. The faint red line on her wrist where an elastic had snapped earlier. The small scar near her knuckle, a burn almost healed. The posture trained by please and thank you, by not being seen. And he saw his father's smile, small, private, the kind he used to reserve for Sunday lunches, for music played on vinyl, for something he recognized as his. "Where did you learn that?" Sal asked, the Sicilian shaping his English, velvet over stone. Sarah's heart stumbled. She hadn't meant to reveal herself. The phrase had leapt from memory. Old recordings, a neighbor who became family for a season of her life. "From a friend," she said, steadying the tray. "From someone who taught me to listen." Giovanni stood. Protocol rumbled in the bones of the men nearby, bodyguards straightening without moving. Anthony Marino, the underboss, smiling like a host whose party had just gained a trick. Giovanni reached for a flute to lift the weight from her hand, and when his fingers brushed the stem, the glass didn't tremble. Hers still didn't either. That interested him. "Grazie, signorina," Sal said, softer, eyes glinting. "You said it right." Sarah nodded. She didn't curtsy. She didn't flee. She placed the last flute, and as she turned, the quartet remembered the note it had lost, and the room's pulse resumed. Only it beat a half-second slower now, as if recalibrating around a new center. She had made the city's most untouchable men feel something human by accident. Back in the service corridor, the air changed. No perfume, just bleach and hot dishwater. Sarah leaned her head to the walk-in cooler's door and let the cool steel steal the heat from her cheeks. Stupid, she scolded herself. Rule 1, blend. Rule 2, never draw a circle around yourself. But those 4 words had climbed out of her like birds out of a tree, and now somewhere in that gold room a pivot had happened, a hinge had turned. "Hey," Nina, her fellow server, slid beside her, hip bumping hers. "Did you just kiss the ring in Hobbit language or something?" The music actually stopped. Sarah laughed once, a small glass bell sound. It was, "Hello," in a dialect. "Well, your hello just got noticed by those people." Nina's voice dropped, warning disguised as gossip. "The Rossis. Please don't develop a death wish on shift." "I won't," Sarah said, and meant it. She didn't have room in her budget for dying. Rent, medicine for Mrs. DeLuca upstairs when her arthritis screamed. A stack of community college forms on Sarah's nightstand, blank except for the part where you promise you'll be able to pay somehow. When she pushed back through the door with a tray of canapes, she felt eyes track her as if her name had been spoken. She didn't look for the source. Professionals don't look back, but he did. Giovanni tracked movement like a chess player watches the edge of the board. The waitress slipped the room's geometry into new angles. Not a threat, not a pawn. Something stranger, a piece he hadn't seen before that could change how the endgame looked. Anthony leaned in, voice pitched for intimacy. "Cute, harmless. Send her flowers or send her home. Either way, the show goes on." "That your advice?" Giovanni asked without looking. "Flowers or exile?" Anthony grinned. "Depends on the flowers." Giovanni's eyes skimmed the entrance where Detective Claire Whitaker had just stepped in, hair a clean bob, suit that said, "I will outwork you." Fundraisers were her favorite field. Criminals loved photo ops. She wasn't here for the charity, she was here for him. Their eyes touched, cool and polite, history tucked away like a folded letter in a drawer. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. He returned his attention to his father, whose color looked better than an hour ago. "You look good," he told Sal, which inside their family meant, "Stay with me." "Something about how a person says hello," Sal murmured. "You forget you are a person. Then someone reminds you." Giovanni followed the line of his father's gaze and found the waitress moving through senators and donors like a quiet current under bright boats. She carried stories he didn't know yet. He didn't like not knowing. But he liked the feeling, brief as the blink between notes, that his father had been warmed. A photographer appeared, popped light like a magician's trick, and the evening resumed its choreography. Speeches, soft applause, the auction paddle rising in a hand that betrayed no strain. Sarah fell into rhythm. By dessert, she had nearly convinced herself that nothing had shifted, that words evaporate and leave no scent. Then the first gunshot cracked the ceiling of sound. It wasn't inside the ballroom. The security detail knew that instantly. The echo was wrong, hollowed by distance, too sharp for the carpeted acoustics. It came from the alley, a warning strike, the kind of punctuation men use when they want to be read. Sarah froze. A dessert plate suspended midair. Screams swelled, controlled at the edges by the quiet hands of men who live near violence and do not wish to let it breed. Giovanni's eyes cut to the nearest guard. "Back," he said, and the guard moved toward Sal with a sway that only looked like walking. Anthony's phone was already in his palm, his thumb moving, his smile refusing to drop. Claire Whitaker had her badge out and her body aligned with the door, counting exits, outputs, lies. Sarah's instinct said down, then listen. She slid behind a column and let the tablecloth turn her invisible. The second shot didn't come. Instead, a motorcycle engine revved, taunting, then faded into the artery of State Street. A message had been delivered without ink. Giovanni knew the script. New rivals test old kings, and sometimes they test the sun to taste his metal. He wanted, with a heat that surprised him, to keep this ugliness out of his father's evening. He also wanted to know who had arranged the orchestra. "Sir," Anthony murmured, smoothing his tie that never wrinkled. "I'll check the perimeter." "You'll stay with my father," Giovanni said, and turned. The service corridor air hit him like a different country. He moved fast, smooth, a man used to walking into rooms already decided, staff flattened to the walls, eyes flitting away. He passed the cooler door where a faint oval of warmth still marked a forehead that had rested there earlier, and he wondered what kind of life left such small human evidence behind. He found Sarah before he was looking for her. She had gone to the back loading dock, because she was practical, because the crash she'd heard wasn't a gunshot but a tray hitting concrete. A busboy stood trembling over the ruin of crystal, like a priest at a broken altar. Sarah crouched to help him, voice low and competent, hands quick and unbleeding. We'll sweep, then mop. Breathe. Nobody died. Giovanni stopped in the doorway and watched her gather sharpness with her bare fingers as if she'd done it all her life, rescuing people from small disasters that felt like big ones. She sensed him before she saw him. Her shoulders adjusted, and then she rose, the tray shards stacked. "Sir?" she said, neutral, refusing to be weird about the fact that his suit cost more than her car. "What you said to my father," Giovanni told her. Not many people would know how. She considered him. Close, his face was too symmetrical to be handsome if not for the small ruin at one eyebrow where some old wound had knit imperfectly. It saved him from looking carved by a machine. Not many people would notice. She paused. He looked tired. It seemed kind. Kind. The word hardly ever touched this world. He tasted it like a foreign candy. "Do you know who we are?" "I know you make this city quiet when you want to," she said, not changing tone. "And sometimes you let it be loud." He should have been offended. Instead, he was amused by how cleanly she drew it. "What's your name?" "Sarah Johnson." "Ms. Johnson," he said, and the formality made it sound like a promise. "Tonight, if anyone asks you questions, you didn't hear anything, and you don't know anything." "That's almost always true," she said. "Except that I heard 2 motorcycle tires and a man who likes being watched." Giovanni's head tilted. "You notice things." "I carry plates in rooms where people say things they shouldn't." She lifted the bin of glass. He reached to take it. She did not let him. "I've got it." "Humor me," he said, and when their fingers touched, an uninvited current ran up both of their arms. They both ignored it, the way strangers ignore a spark in a crowded elevator. Politely, privately, promising themselves it meant nothing. On his way back toward the ballroom, he spoke into the air and men answered from the walls. "Sweep the alley, pull the feeds, find the bike. Don't spook the guests. They're already spooked enough by their own mirrors." When the gala limped to a close under the smooth voice of an MC paid to drink panic like a cocktail, Sarah collected last tips and stacked last chairs. She avoided the gold room where the rich shook off fear like glitter. She avoided the loading dock where fear had sounded like glass. "Johnson," the manager intercepted her. "One of the donors asked that you deliver a bottle to his car." "I'm off in 5. "You're on until he stops paying me," the manager said with the humanity of a spreadsheet. Outside, the night had the brittle chill of early March. Lake wind scraped the sky clean of warmth. Sarah hugged her elbows and followed the curb to the valet stand. The bottle wore a ribbon like a medal. The car waiting was black, long, and disagreeable with anonymity. "Ms. Johnson." Giovanni was already at the curb, having slid past the velvet rope of reality like it was his birthright. He opened the back door himself, which she noted because powerful men usually forgot doors had handles. "I'm not getting in that car," she said, and he smiled because fear that tells the truth is a language he respects. "Good," he said, "because you're going in the other one." He nodded to a second vehicle, sleek but less obvious, pulling up behind. "Someone left a message tonight. They don't know you exist. I want to keep it that way. Let me put you in a safe car and drive you 2 blocks. You can tell me to stop where the streetlights work." 2 blocks, she repeated. "My compromise to your independence," he said, and it sounded like he'd made a study of the concept without ever liking the taste. "And my father asked me to say thank you." Sarah looked at the city, at the way the wind shoved newspapers into corners, at the men who pretend they can't see the cold. She looked at the valet who had suddenly discovered the deeper mysteries of his podium. She looked at Giovanni's face and did not see pity there, only an engineer's attention. "How do I keep this thing from breaking?" 2 blocks, she said. He opened the door. Inside, the car smelled like leather and rain. He didn't slide in beside her. He took the front passenger seat, telling the driver to keep hands where hands belonged. The city flowed around them, all glass and angles and old stone shouldering new money. "Who taught you Sicilian?" he asked. "Mrs. DeLuca," Sarah said, looking out so she didn't have to look at him. "She moved into my building when I was 12. I helped carry her groceries. She paid me in cookies and stories." "From where in Sicily?" "Caltanissetta," she said, and his breath hitched. one beat, because that was where Sal's mother had laughed once upon a time. "She's still alive?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Sarah said. "Most days she is." The 2 blocks ended too soon. "Here," Sarah said, indicating the corner with the laundromat that kept odd hours and the bodega that kept odder secrets. The car rolled to a gentle stop, a kindness his drivers rarely offered the brakes. Giovanni turned to face her at last. "If anyone asks about tonight—" "I don't know anything," she said, and gave him a small, sincere smile that felt like it would cost nothing and later cost everything. "Good night, Mr. Rossi." He should have let her go. "Sarah," he said, and used her first name as if it were a private room. "If anything feels wrong, you see a car twice that shouldn't be there, a face that doesn't belong, call this number." He handed her a card. It felt heavier than its size should allow. She didn't take it. "You can keep the city quiet," she said, gentle, "but you can't own every shadow." "That's exactly why you should take it." She did, because he wasn't wrong. She slid it into the small inside pocket of her purse, the one she kept for bus passes and prayers. When she climbed the stairs to her apartment later that night, the card burned against her ribs as if it carried its own weather. She paused on the landing outside Mrs. DeLuca's door and listened, TV murmuring, a kettle complaining, the old woman's voice scolding someone who wasn't there years anymore. Sarah knocked softly. "It's me," she called. "Do you need anything?" The door opened a cautious inch. An eye, bright as a coin, blinked. "Figlia mia," Mrs. DeLuca said and let her in. The apartment smelled like tomatoes and anise cookies. The past warmed its hands by the present like a beggar at a diner's coffee pot. On the TV, a news crawl whispered about a disturbance near a major downtown event. No names, no edges. On the table, a photograph sat in a tilt-back frame. A younger Mrs. DeLuca in a summer dress, sunlight burning holes in the picture. Beside her stood a boy with a storm in his eyes and a smile he hadn't learned yet. "Who is that?" Sarah asked, pointing before she could be polite. "Nobody," the old woman said, too fast. "Eat. You forget to eat." Sarah let it go, not because she was incurious, but because the kettle needed lifting and the sugar needed tapping loose and the old woman needed to talk about saints that didn't visit anymore. She washed a pair of cups and listened to stories stitched out of smoke and bread. Later, in her own place, Sarah set the Rossi card on her dresser and watched it like it might hatch. On the back, in a hand that did not like being sloppy, a second number had been added. Different ink, not business, personal. She traced the digits, then snatched her finger back like the numbers were hot. She didn't want to belong to anybody's storm. Across town, in a house built from stone and silence, Giovanni stood at his father's bedroom door, watching the rise and fall of Sal's chest. "You're not the man who naps," he teased softly. "I am 80, Sal replied without opening his eyes. "And tonight a girl reminded me I had a mother." Giovanni thought about that. About memory as a room someone else could open for you. About a waitress who moved like a solution to a problem he hadn't named. "Don't bring her into this," Sal murmured, as if he had read his son's mind by candlelight. "I won't," Giovanni said, meaning it and already failing. "Sleep." On his desk downstairs, the photograph Anthony had sent an hour earlier waited. A grainy frame grabbed from a camera across the alley. A motorcycle idled, the rider glancing up not at the ballroom but at the service corridor camera, knowing it was there. The face was masked, the eyes were not. Giovanni zoomed until the pixels begged for mercy. He didn't need the mouth to know the line of the cheek, the patience of the stare. Luca Carbone liked to knock without coming in. Giovanni's phone buzzed once, a message from a number he didn't recognize yet, and his pulse did something he disliked. It climbed the stairs of his throat without permission. "Thank you for the ride. Sarah." He typed nothing back for a long minute, because nothing back was safer medication than everything you want. When he finally answered, he used 12 careful words. "If anything feels wrong tonight, call. I don't sleep easily anyway." Sarah read it with the light off, as if secrecy could decrease heat. She put the phone face down, crawled under the thin comforter, and told her heart to be quiet. It wasn't. At 2:12 a.m., a shadow paused on the sidewalk across from her building. Not a man. A shape built from patient cold. It didn't look up. It didn't need to. 2 blocks away, a cruiser idled, Detective Whitaker writing notes in a hand that never forgot. She tapped her pen against her lip and circled a name twice. Carbone, then another name she had no reason to circle at all. Sarah Johnson. By dawn, the city would look washed and ordinary. By noon, the gala would clutter into a headline half-read over lunch. By night, something would break, and someone at the center of the ballroom's quiet would have to decide which world to keep breathing in. What did Sal really see in Sarah's greeting, and why did Luca choose that alley? Why did Mrs. DeLuca hide that summer photograph, and how many people already wrote Sarah's name into a ledger she can't see? Morning pretended last night hadn't happened. The sun polished downtown into something innocent. The papers called it a minor disturbance, and the Palmer House staff swept glass until the floor forgot. Sarah tied her apron at the bistro, the knot stiff, the espresso hiss fussy. Cities move on. Rent demands it. At 9:12 a.m., a motorcycle ghosted past the window. It didn't stop, just stained the air with attention. "Detective for you," her manager said, waving a card. Claire Whitaker crossed the room like a quiet verdict. Badge flash, small nod. "Sarah Johnson, you worked the Rossi Gala." "Yes." "See anything unusual?" A tray, a bike, a room that froze when 4 Sicilian words lifted like steam from old kitchens. "A tray broke," Sarah said. "A bike backfired in the alley. That's all I saw. If anyone contacts you, you call me." Claire's gaze measured the tensile strength of Sarah's composure. "Don't try to be brave in other people's wars." "Brave isn't my thing," Sarah answered. "It becomes everyone's thing eventually," Claire said. At the door she paused. "Where did you learn Sarah Bonu?" "A neighbor," Sarah said. "Why?" "Because Sal Rossi hasn't smiled in public in years." The bell chimed Claire out as if punctuating a secret. Lunch thinned. Nina texted, "Are you in love with your own funeral?" Sarah pocketed the phone, finished her shift, buttoned her coat, stepped into a thin winter that made newspapers skitter like gray birds. 2 doors from the bistro, a black sedan slid from the curb and unrolled its window. "Get in," Giovanni said, voice calm, as if calm could be put on like a coat. "I'm not being collected," she said. A patrol car tore past, sirens slicing the block. Half a length behind, a rider idled by a pawn shop, visor down, head tilted toward her reflection in the glass. He was counting. He didn't need to follow if she walked into his math. Sarah got in the car. Leather. Quiet. The city muted behind glass. Giovanni didn't scold. He looked annoyed at the physics of danger. "I told you to call if something felt wrong." "It felt wrong when your face appeared like a headline," she said. She looked back. The rider hadn't moved. "Who is he?" "Luca Carbone," Giovanni said, tasting winter metal. "He watched the staff entrance last night. He'll keep watching until I either notice or wish I hadn't." "I'm nobody," Sarah said. "Not the kind that goes unseen," he said, and the way he said it rejected the word nobody on principle. They dropped into an underground garage. An elevator rose without courtesy. A corridor wore quiet and good art. The apartment beyond held stone and light and money that had learned not to shout. No gold, no brag. Just a kitchen with knives that could forgive human error. "Ground rules," Giovanni said, shrugging off his coat. "If you leave, tell me. Unknown numbers, don't answer. If you see a red dot, hit the floor." "I prefer the second one." "Me too." He handed her water. Their fingers didn't touch. The absence felt louder than contact. "Who taught you to greet my father?" "Rosa DeLuca," Sarah said. "Moved into my building when I was 12. I carried groceries, learned cookies and prayers." "From where in Sicily?" "Caltanissetta." A current passed under his face. He pulled a leather book from a drawer, flipped to a summer photograph. Girls with ribboned hair, sunlight making holes in the paper. A caption, "Rosa DeLuca, Santa Lucia Festival." "My grandmother's village," Giovanni said, softer. Rosa argued with my grandmother, then sang with her. He closed the book with care. Your dialect wasn't just right. It was home. Do you get tired of being the man everyone watches? She asked. Constantly, he said, surprised at how easily the truth came out. I'm also the man who keeps them alive when they do. Footsteps in the hall. Not the driver, a taller silence. Anthony Marino appeared with a white bakery bag, smile framed like a treaty. Cannoli, he said, since you skip lunch when bullets get discussed. You deliver pastries now? Giovanni asked. I deliver whatever keeps your pulse under a felony, Anthony said, letting his gaze inventory Sarah quickly. Ms. Johnson. I'm Anthony. I schedule birthdays and triage messes. He offered a cannolo. Neri's, not as good as Rosa's. The ricotta doesn't taste like regret. As Sarah reached, Anthony's eye flicked to the small burn scar on her knuckle. Every kitchen writes on you, she said. Every world does. He glanced at Giovanni. We found the bike, abandoned under the L, clean, too clean. His way of dropping flowers, Giovanni said, thorns included. Anthony saluted with pastry and vanished like a rumor. Sugar steadied Sarah's hands. The skyline pretended to be angles. It was a theater of consequences, and she was in the front row, no ticket. What happens after the afternoon? You go home if the patterns outside your building behave. If they don't, they learn to. And if I say no, then I escort you anyway and make the patterns like me. The knock that followed was soft, an old neighbor's knock. Giovanni checked the camera, the peephole, the habit of caution. He opened with one hand behind the door. An elderly woman pushed past his caution as if it were furniture. Figlia mia, said Rosa DeLuca, coat buttoned, crooked, eyes brisk. She set a tin on the counter. I made too many. Take. Giovanni blinked twice. You know each other. In Sicily everyone knows everyone, Rosa said, inspecting him like bone china. You're taller than your mother said. Sarah hugged her, warmth pooling just under sternum bone. You shouldn't be out. If someone wants me, they can stand in line. Rosa fished a folded paper from her coat. I brought this. The letter had been wiped by years but not erased. The hand was masculine, careful. The name at the top, Salvatore Rossi. Giovanni drew breath like a man stepping into cold water. My aunt saved things, Rosa said. Your mother gave her this when men had to leave quickly and promises had to move faster. She smoothed the paper on stone. One day a girl who says hello the right way would need to see it. Giovanni read, gratitude, debt, a vow in a kitchen dusted with flour. If ever a DeLuca needs shelter under our roof, my house is her house. My sons her servants before they are kings. S. Rossi. The apartment's hum changed key. Outside, a hawk stitched wind between buildings. You understand, Rosa said, chin up. You are not doing her a favor. You are paying your debt. I understand, Giovanni said, and the sentence fit him like a suit his father had owned first. They ate like a family invented after breakfast. Coffee, cheese, and East cookies shaped like memory. Giovanni told exactly one boyhood story. Rosa matched him with a fig-thieving dog. Sarah let the warmth soften the place the city had kept cold. Her phone vibrated on the counter. Unknown number. 30 seconds of video. Don't, Giovanni said. He unplugged the Wi-Fi and mirrored the phone to the monitor. Grainy footage. Last night's alley. The tray of glass. Sarah crouching to help the busboy. The camera zoomed with human hands until her face filled the frame, then panned to the service door. A small chalk X glared white on metal. Rosa crossed herself. Sarah's grip whitened on the counter's edge. Carbone's mark? She asked, voice steady by choice. Sometimes he signs his promises, Giovanni said, pausing the frame as if pressure could erase it. The monitor went black. The intercom buzzed, flat, insistent. Camera feed, an empty lobby, a florist's ribbon around a cardboard box. Label, neat, for Sarah. No one touches it, Giovanni said into an unseen channel. Clear the lobby. Drone, not hands. If it breathes, I want to hear lungs. Rosa slid her palm over Sarah's knuckles. You are not afraid, she ordered. You are smart. Be angry later. A message arrived. Words this time. Say hello back. El Giovanni didn't answer. He looked at Sarah the way an engineer looks at a bridge he refuses to let fail. You're not going home tonight, he said. He delivered to your door. I have plants, she said, because the mind snatches the small when the big threatens to drown it. I'll water them, Giovanni said. Do you even own a plant? I own people who own plants. Rosa snorted, then softened. She stays, and you call your father. The apartment obeyed her cadence. Giovanni spoke Italian down a line that carried history. The intercom buzzed twice. Marco's code. Clear. The feed showed the ribboned box open on the lobby's polished floor. Inside, a metal music box nestled in tissue, the kind you wound with a small key. 2 words engraved on the lid. Santa Lucia. Rosa's breath caught. Your grandmother's song, she whispered. We sang it when the lights went out. Giovanni's eyes went midnight dark. Bring it up, he said. Gloves. Don't wind it. Moments later, the florist's box sat on the counter like a dare. Anthony reappeared with rain at his shoulders, smile useless now, gaze cutting to the monitor where the chalk X waited like a wound. He's playing with your saints, Anthony said. Giovanni lifted the lid, careful. Beneath the velvet lay a square of paper, folded once. 5 words in clean hand. Who taught her to pray? Rosa's jaw set. Tell him a woman did, she said, proud as banners. Giovanni slid the note into his inner pocket where vows go. Calm wrapped his voice like wire. We're done answering his questions. He turned to Sarah. The steel left his expression, leaving only decision. Pack a bag. 1 night, maybe 2. You're coming to the house. The house, she echoed. My father's, he said. If Luca wants prayer, let him read the page where Salvatore Rossi keeps his promises. Sarah thought of the letter, of my sons her servants before they are kings, of the writer counting through pawnshop glass, of Claire's card burning her pocket a polite square. She nodded. 1 night. 1 night, he promised, and both of them knew promises are the city's most endangered species. She crossed his threshold later with a tote of necessary things. Sweater, toothbrush, the courage people pack without naming. The lake sky faltered into a bruised color. Men who watch these things notice. Phones lit. Patterns shifted. In another room, 3 miles away and below ground, a man turned a tiny key once, twice, 3 times, and waited for a song. In a police sedan 2 blocks from Sarah's building, Detective Whitaker circled a name twice, Carbone, and another she had no right to know yet, Sarah Johnson. In a bedroom of stone and silence, Sal Rossi sighed in his sleep, hearing in dreams a girl's voice say hello the way home does. And in a kitchen that had briefly felt like a truce, the music box on the counter kept its silence, lid engraved with a saint who watches ships find harbor. What page from the Rossi past is Luca forcing them to read, and who else remembers the prayer Sarah didn't know she was saying? Why did the writer count instead of follow? And what happens to a promise when someone whines the wrong song? The Rossi mansion woke to the silence of power. Morning light slid across marble and steel, catching dust motes that looked like secrets too small to tell. Sarah stood at the kitchen sink rinsing fruit, still wearing the borrowed sweater that smelled faintly of cedar and safety. Buongiorno, figlia mia. Sal Rossi's voice carried the smoke of decades. He leaned on his cane with dignity that needed no audience. You greet like a Sicilian. It sounds like home. Sarah smiled. Rosa taught me that. She said the right word can open a door. Giovanni entered, sleeves rolled, eyes already assessing the world. He stopped at the sight of them, his father eating biscotti, the girl who'd changed the air in his house. For a second, something unguarded passed through him. Sal looked up. Lunch at Librezza, on the lake. The girl comes. You'll worry less. Giovanni's jaw tightened. It's not safe. Then make it safe, Sal said simply. And that was that. Librezza was the kind of restaurant that pretended not to know who it served. Frosted windows, clean linen, soft music. Giovanni chose the seat by the wall, scanning every reflection. Sarah sat beside Sal, her quietness like a thread holding the moment together. For a while, there was peace. Sal told a story about fishing in Caltanissetta. Sarah laughed, and Giovanni found himself watching her lips curve instead of the door. Then something shifted. The light dimmed, not from clouds, but from a shadow outside. A figure stood beyond the frosted glass, still, deliberate. A small chalk X glared near the corner. Sarah saw it first. Her pulse tripped. She leaned toward Sal, whispering in Sicilian, "Terra ora," down now. The old man obeyed without question. Giovanni reacted at the same breath, pushing Sarah under the table and covering her with his body. The glass shattered. A muffled pop, then a rain of shards and white light. Sarah felt the world tilt, the thunder of impact swallowed by Giovanni's chest pressed against her back. He whispered against her hair, steady and low, "I've got you." It wasn't a command. It was a promise. Anthony's voice roared from somewhere distant. Orders, movement, the rhythm of chaos. But Giovanni didn't move until the silence turned real again. When he finally looked up, the entire window was gone, and the lake stared back like an open wound. Sal brushed glass off his sleeve, unshaken. "Everyone breathing?" Sarah nodded, though her hands trembled. Giovanni caught them and held them still. "You saved him," he said quietly. She blinked. "I just saw the shadow." "Before I did," he said, and that truth settled between them like heat. They left through the service exit. Cops swarmed the front. Reporters shouted. Cameras blinked. But Giovanni kept his father between himself and the chaos. Sarah close enough to feel his heartbeat. The moment they reached the car, he turned to her. "You stay with me," he said, "until I say otherwise. I can take care of myself. You already did. Now it's my turn." Back at the Rossi estate, the walls felt higher, the light dimmer. Rosa opened the door before they reached it, scolding in Sicilian as if they'd come home late from school. She cupped Sarah's face, checked for cuts, then muttered a prayer halfway between anger and relief. "Sit," she ordered. "Both of you. Eat. Saints can't guard empty stomachs." Giovanni almost smiled, but didn't. He poured espresso, the act so ordinary it hurt. Then his phone buzzed. A new message. No text. Just a 30-second video. He opened it on the counter screen. Grainy footage, Labreza's shattered glass. The moment before the shot, Giovanni shielding Sarah, his hand covering her head. The video froze there, a frame of protection turned into art. Words appeared at the bottom. "Tell her to say it again." Rosa crossed herself. Sarah's breath hitched. Sal's eyes darkened with something ancient. Giovanni closed the screen, every muscle wired with control. "He's watching us. Listening." "Who?" Sarah whispered. "Luca Carbone," he said, "and he just made it personal." She shook her head. "You can't fight a ghost." "I can," Giovanni said, "if the ghost threatens what's mine." He didn't mean it as a claim, but the words hung between them like a touch neither dared to name. Sarah looked away, heart pounding too loudly. "You shouldn't say that." "Why?" "Because ghosts listen too." Night fell fast over the lake. In the kitchen, the old music box still sat where they'd left it, its lid engraved with Santa Lucia. No one had dared wind it. They were talking quietly, plans, security, escape routes, when the first note rose. Soft, metallic. The melody played on its own. Sarah froze. Giovanni crossed the room, lifted the box with gloved fingers. The song continued, bright and haunting, the tune his grandmother had loved. On the underside, newly scratched into the metal, a mark gleamed white. A second X. "Luca's signature," Giovanni murmured. Rosa's spoon fell from her hand. "He's writing in your house now." The music wound down to silence. Only Sarah's breathing filled the space. Giovanni turned to her. His voice was quiet, certain. "You're not leaving this house tonight." "I wasn't planning to," she said, and something inside both of them stopped running. He stepped closer, close enough that the fear in her chest turned into something warmer. His hand brushed a piece of glass from her hair, slow, careful. "When I said I'd keep you safe," he murmured, "I didn't mean behind walls. I meant anywhere." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "That's dangerous, Giovanni." He smiled, faint and tired. "Everything worth keeping is." And from the corner of the room, unseen by both, the security camera light blinked red, recording every word. "Who placed the second mark inside the Rossi home? And why does Luca Carbone know the song that only the Rossis and Rosa should remember? Night tasted like metal in the Rossi house, like keys and vows. After La Brezza, they drifted into a tense orbit around the kitchen island. Rosa stirring sauce she never let boil, Sal passing opinions like salt, Giovanni turning silence into a strategy, Sarah pretending her hands were steady. The music box sat on a tray, lid closed, its tiny X catching the light when no one wanted it to. The red pinprick on the ceiling camera blinked, a heartbeat you could miss if you weren't grieving for quiet. Giovanni noticed. He always noticed. "Kill every indoor lens except the main hall," he told Marco. "Hardline record only, no wireless. Anything with a battery lives in a drawer." "Yes, sir." Sarah watched the dot die, felt her shoulders drop a fraction. "I don't like being watched." Giovanni looked at her as if she'd said a sacred thing. "Then we make a room no one can see into." He led her down the back corridor to a door that didn't advertise itself. Oak, plain, a brass plate that read storage. A fingertip to the jamb, and the panel hid into the wall to reveal a second door. The hinges whispered. Inside, a square of light, soundproof, air-filtered, stone-quiet. Not a bunker, a chapel of safety. He didn't explain it. He just stepped in and let her feel the hush settle on her skin. "If you can't find me, come here," he said. "If you're scared, come here. If you're angry, come here first and then come find me." She turned, hair slipping its pin. "What if you're the one who's scared?" He almost smiled. "I don't do that." Her brow lifted. He sighed. "If I ever am, I'll meet you here." "Then it's a pact," she said softly, and the room absorbed the word like bread drinks oil. They walked back slower than they'd left. The house had learned them in a day, memorized their footsteps and the way their voices found each other without searching. In the gallery, Sal stood studying an old photograph, Caltanissetta, a summer street. Rosa, young, halfway laughing. A boy with storm in his eyes, not yet a king. "My son will insist on walls," Sal said without looking over. "That is his trade, but walls do not keep promises. People do." He glanced at Sarah then, measuring something invisible. "He keeps them. Do you?" She felt the weight and stood under it. "Yes." "Good," Sal said, satisfied. "Then you may stay." As if he were the one who had needed convincing. The quiet war began with small moves. Giovanni replaced the house phones with burners the size of matchboxes. One for each person, only one number saved on each. His. He had Sarah carry hers in the inner pocket of the cardigan Rosa insisted she borrow. "For saints and drafts," the old woman said, tucking the wool around Sarah's shoulders like a blessing disguised as scolding. He showed Sarah the blind corners of the ground floor, the way reflections off the lake turned windows into one-way mirrors at dusk. He taught her the Rossi version of ordinary. Never walk the same route twice, never let a door announce you, never assume a quiet street. "Say we're separated," he said. "I need a word that means I come to you and kick down whatever stands between us." She thought of kitchens and glasses and chalk. Casa. Home. He nodded. "And a word that means run." She didn't hesitate. "Vento. Wind. Good." He paused. "A word that means don't be a hero." She gazed at him until he looked away first. Giovanni. His mouth tilted, the concession of a man who had never been named a command before. They ate early, they ate together. Rosa fed them as if fullness could turn into armor. Claire Whitaker came by once, sleeves rolled, badge tucked, and left a single page on the counter, a warrant list for a camera vendor that had recently serviced half the good addresses on the lakefront. Wireless by default. She didn't linger. "You didn't get this from me," she said, And I saw nothing on your counters except flour. Anthony's name crossed Sarah's mind like a shadow, a memory from that frozen moment at La Brezza, the radio squawk that had said Marino. Giovanni never spoke it aloud. He watched Anthony the way a surgeon watches a perfectly beating heart that might still hide a splinter. Trust what you can prove, Rosa murmured to Sarah, noticing what people pretend she doesn't, and keep kindness in your pocket. You never know when you will need to pay with it. Is kindness currency here? Sarah asked. In every world, Rosa said. But the exchange rate changes. At dusk, the lake bruised purple. Giovanni insisted on air. 10 minutes in the garden, he said. Not the street. I control the hedges. She followed him through the conservatory where lemon trees wintered like visiting nobility. Outside, the path ran a modest curve between you and the stone that folded the estate from the world. The cold kissed her face. He walked close, not touching her, and she felt more protected than when bodyguards ringed a door. Today taught me something, he said. That you hate frosted glass? That I hate not seeing danger coming, he corrected. And that you see it sooner than I do when it wears a face instead of a plan. She remembered the chalk on the window, the way her hands had moved before her mind. Rosa taught me to read rooms. Poor women learn, whose hands are empty, whose rings were pawned last week, who came to eat or to be seen eating. And which men are storms. Her smile was small. You make the air change. Not because you try, because you are who you are. A crow took off from the wall and spun the sky into black ribbon. He watched it go. My world eats everything soft, he said. It swallows it, calls it dessert, asks for seconds. It's not noble or glamorous. It is a thing that demands you know what you'll lose before you sit down at the table. I should send you away. You tried, she said, and then you put your body between me and glass. His jaw worked. I'll do worse to the next thing that comes for you. Then don't send me away, she said, simple as water. Make room. He stopped. She did too. The hedge held its breath. Stay, he said. I already am. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the care of a man disarming a small bomb. He didn't kiss her. He didn't need to. The promise changed the night anyway. A motion at the far end of the garden. Marco lifting 2 fingers. Time. They went back in, through the warm lemon air, into a house that felt marginally more like Casa and marginally less like a map of exits. The next move in the war arrived in a brown envelope pushed under the front gate. No courier. No camera caught the hand. Inside, a restaurant reservation, printout for tomorrow, La Brezza, 1:30 p.m., Sarah Bonua, the email Luca had used to book the room the day before, and a second sheet, a floor plan of the Rossi ground floor annotated in neat, impersonal handwriting. Sarah stood with Giovanni over the island as he read. She watched his breath shorten and then lengthen on purpose. He's seeding fear, she said. He's itching for me to flinch, he said. I won't give him the pleasure. So we go back to La Brezza? We go somewhere else, he said, and make him look foolish. Anthony arrived with a tablet and a face that had learned to be pleasant under floodlights. Pulled every Sarabonu account within the last 72 hours, he said. 13 throwaways, all spun up from the same offshore block. He's mocking us with our own good taste. Then we change the taste, Giovanni said. Tomorrow, the old South Pier, private pavilion, 1 entrance, 3 exits. He'll expect glass. We'll give him wood. Anthony's smile flickered. Invitation list? Family, Giovanni said, which in their dialect meant few. Rosa, my father, Sarah. He didn't look at her when he said her name. The air had to carry the weight. Security? Unobtrusive, he said, but absolute. He and Anthony measured each other for a long breath. The air thinned. Sarah felt the click of a lock she couldn't see. When Anthony left, his cologne stayed half a heartbeat after his shoes stopped speaking. Do you believe in him? She asked. I believe in what we built together, Giovanni said. Belief and proof are cousins, not twins. And me? You? He faced her fully, and whatever else was in the room folded its hands and listened. I believe you are the first thing in years that makes me want to build something that doesn't require proof. Her eyes stung. That sounds like a risk. It is, he said. And I am very good at risks. Rosa coughed a warning from the stove. Eat your soup before it thinks you do not love it. They obeyed. Night concentric around the house in rings of light and guard roots. Sarah lay awake in the guest room whose window framed the lake like a promise larger than men's plans. The burner phone on her nightstand glowed a single stubborn dot. She touched the wool at her shoulder and thought of words that had become their map. Casa, Vento, Giovanni. The dot blinked. A message, no number, just audio. She sat up, pulse rising into her throat. She hesitated, then pressed play. A child's voice sang Santa Lucia. Not the version the box played, not the church melody Rosa hummed, but the broken lullaby of a worn cassette, birdsong over static, a hand-clapping offbeat. Her own childhood, her mother's accent, not Sicilian, not anything Giovanni would know, cutting across the final lines. Sleep, Sarah, sleep. The phone slipped in her hand. Her mouth dried. For a second, the room fell away. There was only a fourth-floor walk-up, a summer fan that clacked, a woman's voice exhausted and good. Then a second voice, a man, lower, smooth in a way that made the hair on her arms lift. Not Giovanni. Tell him to make it sing again, the man said, soft. Tell him to use the key. Tell him we're listening. She was on her feet before the message ended, the burner clenched, the carpet cold. She crossed the hall without shoes. Giovanni's light still glowed under his door because men like him do not gift darkness with their sleep. He opened before she knocked, shirt unbuttoned at the throat, a map of long days written on his face. One look and everything he was adjusted to the exact shape of her alarm. What is it? She handed him the phone. He listened. His eyes didn't show it, but his breath did. One fraction shorter at sleep. Sarah, and harder at use the key. How would he have that? He asked. I don't know, she said. My mother used to play that to drown the sirens. He reached for her hand and kept it. We're not winding the box. He'll keep pushing, she whispered. He wants to hear what you do when you're told. Then he'll keep being disappointed. They moved down the hall together, the house learning a new route. In the kitchen, the music box sat where it had sat all day, patient as a wolf. Giovanni didn't touch it. He looked at the underside instead, at the X scratched where a maker's mark should be. He took a photo. He sent it to a lab that owed him accuracy before oxygen. Rosa? Sarah asked. Would she know something? Maybe, he said. But I won't wake her to share this kind of sound. He turned to find Sarah closer than the sentence he'd just spoken. Protection has a gravity. It draws, and then it stops pretending it doesn't. He lifted a hand and cupped the back of her head like he had under glass, but softer, not fear, permission. She leaned once, not all the way, as if a world could tilt and still not spill. He rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. You're safe, he said, while I breathe. I believe you, she said, and belief turned the air warmer. The burner chimed again. Unknown contact wants to airdrop a photo. Giovanni declined. The house hummed like a cat about to fight. Back to the quiet room, he said, not asking. She nodded. In the small stone space, the silence sat with them like a third person. He took the lone chair. She sat cross-legged on the rug. He handed her a blanket as if she'd asked and didn't know it. Tell me something true that isn't about fear, he said, voice low. She thought. I wanted to study languages. You already do. Not like this, she said, smiling in spite of herself. He told her one too. When I was 10, my father taught me how to fillet a fish. He said the knife will only slip if you let your attention slip first. He looked at her. I haven't let it slip since. Maybe today you did, she whispered. A little. With me. Maybe, he said. And no glass fell. They might have slept there. They might have invented sleep in a house that forgot the recipe. But outside the quiet room, in the kitchen that still held women's hands and old men's opinions, someone knocked on the back door, soft, domestic, the sound of a neighbor who needs sugar at midnight. Marco's radio. Movement by the service entrance. Giovanni's body changed from warmth to geometry. "Stay," he said, and hated the word even as he used it. She caught his sleeve. "Casa, if you need me. Vento, if I need you." "Giovanni, if I'm about to do something stupid," he finished, and left with a look that would have come back even if coming back were impossible. He reached the kitchen as Marco flooded the yard lights. The silhouette beyond the glass wore a cap pulled low, hands visible, fingers splayed like a prayer. The camera feed came up on the counter screen, grainy, delayed. A man leaned into the frame. "Package for Sarah Johnson," he said, voice muffled through the door. "From the florist." Rosa's florist tied bows like rosaries. This ribbon was wrong. Too slick, too bright. Giovanni signaled no one touches. A drone whirred from the pantry, ugly and useful, and nudged the box away from the threshold. It hit a seam in the slate and tilted. Inside, no roses. Just paper and a phone the color of midnight. It lit itself. Sarah's number appeared on the screen it held up to the glass. Back in the quiet room, Sarah's burner chimed again. One photo received. She didn't open it. She whispered the pack to the walls and waited for a step. The music box sang, soft from the kitchen, one single note like a test of faith. Giovanni didn't wind it. He didn't have to. The lid had shifted ever so slightly, the hinge glinting. He lifted it with gloved fingers and saw no spring tense, no key twitch. Only a sliver of thin wire, almost invisible, running from the underside to the counter's edge, disappearing into the seam near the camera conduit. "Not haunted," he murmured. "Wired." He traced the filament to the junction box and cut it clean. The wire died, and with it, the illusion that ghosts played saints' songs. His relief lasted the length of a heartbeat. The phone inside the florist's box vibrated again, harder, like breathing. A text crawled across the unlocked screen in white on black. He didn't touch it. He read, "Check your storage room." He didn't have to ask which one. He ran. Down the hall, the oak door that said storage stood where he'd left it. The hidden panel behind it had closed itself as it always did, seamless as a lie. He pressed and the wall yielded, and the quiet room opened like a held breath released. The chair sat where he'd left it. The blanket lay folded on the rug exactly as Sarah would have done. Sarah was not there. On the stone floor, her burner phone blinked one slow light, a patient star. And on the chair, placed with the gentleness of a hand that enjoyed its own restraint, sat the music box, its lid half open, the word Santa catching the light, Lucia hidden in shadow. Who opened the quiet room without a key? And how did a man from the lake know the lullaby that only a mother and a girl should remember? Where did Sarah go in a house designed to keep her? And which door isn't a door at all? The house was too quiet. Quiet in the wrong key. Giovanni stood in the doorway of the storage room, its walls still, the blanket folded, the music box gleaming half open under the dim light. Only the small burner phone on the floor blinked, a single blue pulse that made the shadows breathe. "Sarah," he called once, steady. No answer. He crossed the room in 2 strides, checked the corners, the vents, the hidden panel behind the supply cabinet. Nothing. Whoever had taken her hadn't broken locks. They'd known which ones to whisper open. Marco burst in behind him. All gates sealed. Cameras looped for 90 seconds. Then blank. Clean job. Giovanni lifted the music box. Inside, a folded card rested against the gears. 5 words, written in the same tidy hand that had mocked them before. Every promise has a price. He closed the lid slowly, his pulse louder than the hinge. "Pull every vehicle tag within 5 miles, he ordered. "I want heat maps, not guesses." Then, quieter, he took her. Sarah woke to motion. The hum of tires, the low roll of an engine. The world outside the tinted window looked unfamiliar, an industrial stretch of Chicago she'd never seen, where the lake wind smelled like metal in distance. Her wrists weren't bound, her fear was. Across from her sat Luca Carbone, younger than she'd expected, older than his smile. Black suit, no tie, fingers tapping against his knee in the rhythm of a song only he could hear. "You speak Sicilian well," he said conversationally. "Better than Giovanni does, I'd say." She stayed silent. He smiled wider. "Don't worry, you're not a hostage. You're a mirror, and Giovanni hates mirrors." The car turned down a pier road, headlights slicing mist. A small boathouse waited at the end, its windows flickering with lamplight. Luca gestured toward it. "Our families once shared tables, bread, wine, secrets. Then his father decided he was king, and I decided I didn't believe in crowns." "You're hurting him for history?" "I'm reminding him he's human," Luca said. "And because you made him forget." He leaned closer, voice dropping to something almost kind. "Do you know what happens when a man like Giovanni loves? He hesitates. And when he hesitates, men like me win." Sarah's heart beat in her throat, but her voice was steady. "Maybe love isn't hesitation. Maybe it's courage that doesn't look like yours." Luca studied her face, curious rather than angry. "Courage," he repeated. "Tell me if you still call it that when he's the one bleeding." Giovanni's convoy sliced through the night. 3 cars, engines low, lights dimmed. His phone buzzed with updates, each one useless. No sight, no trace, no demand. The absence of a ransom was worse than ransom. He looked out at the dark water. "He's not hiding her. He's showing her something," he murmured. Sal stood by the window, leaning on his cane. "What are you willing to pay, son?" "Anything but her." "That's not how debts work," Sal said. "They take what you won't give." Giovanni turned. "You taught me to build empires, not funerals. And yet every empire ends in one," Sal replied softly. Giovanni looked at the letter on the counter, the old promise between the Rossis and the De Lucas, and felt its words like a chain and a compass at once. "My sons her servants before they are kings." He reached for his gun, then stopped. "Not like this," he said to himself. "He wants war. I'll give him precision." At the boathouse, Sarah sat by the window while Luca poured wine. "You think he's coming," he said. "I know he is." He smirked. "That's what ruins men. Faith. You don't believe in anything?" "In control," he said. "In knowing the cost before you pay it." She met his gaze. "Then you've already lost. You don't even know what love costs." For a heartbeat, something flickered in him. Recognition, maybe, of a truth he couldn't afford. He looked away. "He'll trade something for you. He always does. And when he does, he'll see what loyalty really means." The door opened behind them. Giovanni stepped through it like a shadow becoming real. He wasn't supposed to find them that fast. He had followed patterns, phone pings, an intuition that had once saved his life. This time it saved hers. Luca raised his glass in mock greeting. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten your manners." Giovanni's voice was a blade sheathed in calm. "Let her go, and maybe you keep your fingers." "Still pretending you're not the same as me?" Luca asked. "You build your kingdom on silence and pretend it's virtue. I simply speak out loud." Giovanni's gun never wavered. "You mistake control for chaos. That's why you'll die looking surprised." Luca laughed softly. "Maybe. But before I do, you'll have to choose which promise to break. Your father's or hers." He nodded toward Sarah. A camera in the corner blinked red. "This conversation is being recorded," Luca said. "Send it to the world, and the great Giovanni Rossi becomes what he's always been, a criminal with a pretty girl in his bed. Don't send it, and I release her, but your father's life ends by morning." Sarah's voice was barely breath. "Don't." He looked at her, every calculation dissolving. "Sarah, whatever he's threatening, it isn't me he wants. It's you broken." Giovanni took one step forward. "Then he gets neither." He fired once. The bullet shattered the camera, not Luca. Sparks burst. The red light died. The room smelled of cordite and fury. Luca's smile faltered. "You just chose her over your father," he said. "No," Giovanni replied. "I chose not to let you own the choice." He moved faster than Luca expected, slammed him against the window frame. The gun clattered to the floor. "You want blood?" Giovanni hissed. "You can drown in your own." Luca laughed through the pain. "And now she knows what you are." Giovanni looked at Sarah, dust, fear, and grace in her eyes, and felt the truth burn. She did know. And she hadn't run. "Let's go," he said, his hand finding hers. She didn't ask if he'd killed Luca. She didn't need to. The lake outside was loud enough to bury anything. Back at the estate, Rosa waited by the door, praying in Sicilian under her breath. When she saw Sarah step out of the car, she crossed herself and hugged her so tightly that even fear had to wait its turn. Giovanni followed slower, his shirt torn, his face unreadable. Sal met his eyes, saw the decision already made there. "It's done," Giovanni said. Sal nodded. "Then you're no longer a prince, my son. You're a man." Sarah stood beside them, hair tangled by wind. "He said every promise has a price," she whispered. Giovanni looked at her. "Then I'll pay it. Even if it cost you everything." He stepped closer, voice low, unflinching. "Everything is nothing without you safe." The words broke something inside her and built something new in its place. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. Outside, dawn bruised the sky, the lake turning to gold. For the first time in years, the Rossi house exhaled. But from the garden gate, a shadow watched, someone in a gray coat, face unseen. When the light touched his shoes, a small white X gleamed on the ground beneath him. Who placed the final mark, and what promise still waits to be paid when the sun rises over the Rossi estate? Dawn reached the lake like a bandage pressed to a wound. The Rossi estate stood quiet, but not the wrong kind of quiet. This one had breath in it. In the kitchen, Rosa lit a burner and whispered a prayer that sounded suspiciously like an argument with God. In the hall, Sal adjusted his cuff as if putting the world back on straight. On the island, the music box sat inside an evidence bag, its little X dulled by plastic. Giovanni hadn't slept. He'd watched the security feeds rewind and rewind until the 90-second blackout blurred. When the sun finally shouldered the windows, he was still at the counter, shirt from last night open at the throat, jaw rough with decisions. Sarah padded in barefoot, cardigan pulled around her like a promise kept. Her hair was a gentle mess. She paused at the doorway and read the room the way she always did. The way Rosa's shoulder dropped when she saw her, the way Sal's chin lifted a fraction. "Good, you're unbroken." The way Giovanni's eyes softened before the rest of him remembered not to. "Buongiorno," she said. He exhaled like he'd been holding that word for an hour. "How's your pulse?" "Borrowing steadiness from your coffee," she said, and it made him smile in spite of himself. Rosa slid a cup toward her. "Drink." "Then we fix what men broke." Sal tapped his cane once. "Begin with the person inside your walls." The room cooled. The suspicion that had been stalking the edges of the story stepped into the light. Giovanni's gaze cut to Anthony's empty stool. The radio squawk yesterday, the old file that had popped on Claire's list, Marino. A name like a key in the wrong lock. "Claire's on her way," Giovanni said, voice even. "And I already pulled the Rossi permits from 15 years back. There's a Marino on the vendor line." He slid a printout across the counter. "Johnny Marino, camera installer, signed off on a hardline junction in this house, the one that feeds the storage wing." Sarah felt the floor tilt under the gentlest part of her. "Anthony?" she asked, hating the tremor wrapped around the name. Giovanni shook his head once, sharp. "Anthony's full name is Antonio DeMarco Marino. He shortened it, because our world turns names into targets. But Gianni Marino isn't his father. It's his uncle, a man he doesn't speak to." He tapped the permit. "And the signature on this file? It isn't Anthony's handwriting. It matches the initials etched under the music box, where the maker's mark should be." Rosa's spoon paused midair. "The same hand put eyes in your walls and songs on your tables." "The same hand Luca paid," Sal said. The door chime rang, 2 short pulses, Marco's code for friend at the gate. A minute later, Claire Whitaker walked in with wind on her suit and purpose in her mouth. She took one look at Sarah and relaxed a notch, then slid a folder onto the counter like a card in a game both sides needed to win. "Your ghost has a face," she said. "We matched the scratch under the music box to initials on a run of lakefront installs. Vendor alias is GM full name, Gianni Marino. He used to subcontract for a camera company that lost its ethics before it lost its license. He's been living on pure cash since." "Where is he?" Giovanni asked. Claire's mouth tilted. "He was found 2 hours ago under the old South Pier. Not dead, not smart anymore." She looked at Giovanni. "Someone beat me to him." Giovanni didn't blink. "Not me." "Didn't figure." She turned a page. "He confessed to wiring a false fail-safe across your quiet room. Could pop the panel and kill the feed for 90 seconds from outside. Said a client with winter eyes paid him to target the service corridor and the lake view at La Brezza." Winter eyes. Luca. Claire's gaze softened when it landed on Sarah. "You okay?" "No," Sarah said honestly, then added, "But I will be." "That's the right order." Claire shifted to business. "We picked up Luca's car 1/2 mile from a boathouse. No prints. But we did get a partial from the wine glass he used to preen. He'll like how clean the warrant looks with his name spelled right." Sal's cane ticked once. "Finish it." "We will," Claire said. She hesitated. "And Giovanni? If you want the part where the world still thinks you're respectable to survive, you need to give me one thing I can show on paper that says you tried not to be a monster today." He considered. The old part of him, the one built from steel and swallow, reached for evasion. The new part, which had learned Sarah's name as a direction, overruled it. He slid the evidence bag with the music box toward her. "Vendor confession is yours," he said. "So is the device he used to trigger that song. I'll testify who found it where." Claire took the bag like a priest receiving a relic. "That'll do." Rosa harumphed. "Good. Now leave. He needs to say something he has been carrying around his neck since he came home with broken glass in his hair." Claire's eyebrow arched, amused. "She's the only person I'm afraid of." She tipped 2 fingers in a mock salute and left with the morning. The house exhaled. Sarah's hands curled around the warm cup. Giovanni leaned his palms on the counter as if bracing a map. For once he didn't try to build a wall with words. "I can't make you a safe world," he said. "I don't want one," she said gently. "I want a true one." He studied the coffee's surface. When he looked up, his eyes were unarmored. "When I put my hand over your head at La Brezza, I realized my life divides into before and after that moment. Before, I managed danger. After, I started managing what I couldn't stand to lose." "Me," she breathed. The word so small the room almost missed it. "You," he said. "If you ask me to soften, I will. If you ask me to step back from the part of this city that demands blood, I will carve us a different path. If you ask me to burn it down, I—" He stopped. He was a man who never left sentences unfinished. It made the remaining words larger. "Name the price. I'll pay it." She walked to him, small bare feet across stone that had learned her tread in 2 days. "I'm not a price," she said. "I'm a person. You don't purchase my peace. You practice it." Rosa made a noise that was 90% approval, 10% restraint. Sal's mouth went soft in a way it had not in years. Sarah lifted a hand to Giovanni's face and touched the rough line of his jaw the way some people touch doorways on the way out. "Thank you. Keep me. Here is what I ask," she said. "You keep your promises like they're alive. You never lie to me about the cost. And when this house finishes rebuilding, you leave doors in it, ones people without bodyguards can walk through." "Done," he said, and the ease in his voice, the certainty, turned the next minute into something sacred. They were 3 inches apart and history was ready to close the distance when Marco cleared his throat with a cough that belonged to an old church. "Forgive me, boss." He looked apologetic and not sorry at all. "Anthony's at the gate." Silence acquired teeth. Giovanni turned to the monitor. There he was. Anthony on the stone steps, hands empty, eyes tired but not afraid to be seen. He looked up into the camera and, oddly, smiled the way you smile when you decide the knife won't go in your back today. "Let him in," Giovanni said. Anthony entered without theater. He stopped 3 paces inside the threshold and took in the room. Sal, standing like weathered oak. Rosa, spoon raised as if she'd knight someone with it if necessary. Sarah, steady. Giovanni, unarmed only in obvious ways. "I heard you found my uncle," Anthony said, and the word uncle held a night's worth of knives. "We found him," Giovanni said. "He signed our walls before you ever signed my payroll." Anthony exhaled through his nose, a small surrender. "He's the reason I sent my mother out of state last year. He came around after my father died, promised work, left chalk." His mouth twisted. He said the Rossis never look at the scaffolding that holds up their mirrors. "That's exactly where we're looking now," Giovanni said. Anthony nodded once. "Then here's my resignation." Rosa smacked the counter with her spoon so hard flour jumped. "Nonsense. You bring pastries when people try to shoot us. You do not run away because your family grew a bad limb." He looked at her the way city men look at old women who refuse to be impressed, like they are in the presence of temporary gravity. His gaze slid to Sarah, then back to Giovanni. "Keep me or cut me, but do it with the knife on the table, not behind my back." Giovanni held his eyes for 3 beats that measured the length of a friendship. Then he crossed to him and, instead of taking the resignation, put his hand on Anthony's shoulder. "I won't have Luca take another thing from me," he said, "especially not the people who keep my worst ideas from becoming headlines. Stay, on one condition." Anthony's smile came back cracked and more honest. "Name it." "You answer to her," Giovanni said, tipping his chin at Sarah. "On the house rebuild. She sets the lines we don't cross in our own home." Anthony blinked, then, unexpectedly, grinned. Finally, someone with taste is in charge. Sarah bit back a laugh, warmth rising in a place inside her that had been cold too long. "First line, if it spies, it pays rent, or it leaves." "Done," Anthony said, and for the first time his yes sounded like relief. Rebuilding a house isn't a montage, it's a ritual. They stripped the walls of wires no one had invited. Claire's team came with masks and careful hands, carrying the music box into a van like a dangerous hymn. Contractors, vetted, watched, fed, replaced shiny with solid. Blind corners were made visible. Windows learned to hold light without holding bullets. Sarah drew a map on butcher paper while Rosa dictated in 2 languages. A kitchen with a door that locks from inside. Hallway mirrors angled so the cook can see who's coming. A bell at the service entrance that rings a real bell, not a camera. Sal added 2 requirements: chairs without sharp edges for bad days, a bench at the lake for good ones, and Giovanni acted like every line on that paper arrived by city ordinance. They called the pavilion on the Old South Pier and invited no one. On its fresh wood, they ate thick soup from thermoses and watched the water behave. Luca's men circled once and didn't know why they felt foolish. By afternoon, the wind changed and carried the smell of rain that never arrived. On the second day, Sarah took Giovanni to her building, not because it was safe, but because it was hers. She watered plants while he changed the lock a second time, not because the first one was weak, but because men like him sleep a little better when they are the last hands to touch a bolt. Mrs. DeLuca scolded them both with tears and cookies. Upstairs on a shelf, Sarah found an old cassette marked Santa Lucia, S, her mother's handwriting, the S drawn like a treble clef. She pressed the plastic to her ribs and told Giovanni a story with no villains. A woman who worked too many nights and sang too loud to make the sirens quiet down. He listened as if sirens could still be outsung. "Keep it," he said softly. "We'll digitize it. I want our house to know your music before it knows our rules." Our house. The words fluttered and settled. On the third day, Claire called with 3 sentences that changed the temperature of the city. "We have Luca. No bail. And your vendor sang." Her tone turned wry. "Next time you want to do my job for me, at least send cannoli." Giovanni hung up and faced Sarah and Rosa and Sal in the kitchen that now smelled less like fear and more like lemon and heat. "It's done," he said. Rosa set down the spoon and crossed herself with a sigh that could put out candles. Sal sank into a chair and ignored the way his eyes shone. Anthony arrived with pastry and a grin that finally fit his face. Marco took the long way around the island so he could pretend he wasn't smiling. They didn't celebrate with champagne. They celebrated with a decision. Giovanni stood at the head of the table and, without notes, without permission, changed the Rossi rules. No business in rooms where children could sleep, he said. No meetings with anyone who thinks chalk is a signature. Every contract rescinded that was written in fear. We keep our city quiet without forgetting we're people inside it. He looked at Sarah when he finished, as if checking his math. She nodded once, and something in his chest let go of a knot it had held for years. Say it, Rosa said, flapping her towel. The thing you are swallowing because you think if you spit it out, it makes you small. He turned to Sarah, and this time he didn't mask what lived in his gaze. He stepped close enough that the history in their bodies remembered glass and shelter and a kitchen that had learned new prayers. I love you, he said simply. Silence didn't fall. It rose, like a choir gathering breath. Sarah's hand found the fabric of his shirt and held on as if he were a railing and a horizon. Then keep me, she whispered, and it was both an answer and a challenge. He did what he had been wanting to do since the first time she said hello in a voice that sounded like a door opening. He kissed her, not as conquest, as an agreement. Rosa clapped once, delighted. Sal muttered, about time, to no one who needed telling. Anthony turned to the window and did a very poor job of pretending to be interested in the lake. Marco coughed into a fist and failed to hide his grin. The kiss ended, but the promise didn't. They took dinner to the bench by the water that Sal had demanded. The lake wore sunset like a suit it didn't deserve and tried hard to. Boats stitched slow lines along the horizon. The air tasted like metal less, like rosemary more. Sarah rested her head on Giovanni's shoulder. Tell me something true that isn't about fear, she said. He thought. When I was 10, I thought my life would be a ledger. Debits, credits, survival. Today I realized it can be a story. He turned the ring on her finger that wasn't there yet and made no apology for the future in his touch. If you'll write it with me. She laughed softly, surprised by the ease of it in her mouth. You don't write stories, you rebuild houses. Same thing if you do it right, he said. She tipped her face up. One more rule for the new house. Name it. When women talk, men listen. He smiled. Already happening. They watched the water learn to be evening. Behind them, the house they had reclaimed breathed like something alive. The camera lights stayed dark where they should. The bells rang when Rosa wanted them to. The kitchen kept the kind of heat that doesn't scald. On the stone pillar by the garden gate, someone had scrubbed a thin white X until it was a memory. Sarah ran her thumb over the faint chalk and felt nothing but stone. Gone, she said. Replaced, Giovanni corrected gently, and pulled a stub of charcoal from his pocket, the kind Rosa used to mark the bottoms of cookie tins. He pressed a mark beside the washed place. Not an X, a small cross, tilted like a sailor's charm. For saints that actually listen, he said. For promises that walk, she said. They stood together until the sky went the color of good ink. Somewhere in the city, a camera blinked and then went dead under a court order. Somewhere else, a woman locked a door and finally slept. Back at the bench, the wind picked up and carried a tune that might have been a church melody or the imagination of people who had decided to have a future. Sarah wasn't sure, and for once she didn't need to be. Home, she whispered. Casa, he answered. And for the first time since a girl had said 4 quiet words in a ballroom and stopped a city, the house, the lake, the man, and the woman, each in their own grammar, agreed. If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That's how I'll know you truly liked it. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to join this family of fans who love emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you even more tales like this one.